standing in the middle of a crowded, upscale seafood restaurant while my daughter-in-law smugly told me to pay the bill and leave if I couldn't handle her mother's vile insults wasn't how I expected my evening to end. I am Evelyn Vance, a 64-year-old widow who spent decades keeping the peace at my own expense until I finally realized that my silence was only feeding their arrogance. They fully expected me to shrink back, swallow my pride, and apologize for existing. Instead, I quietly signaled the waiter, laid down my credit card, and paid for every single bite they had consumed. I stood up, looked them dead in the eye, and reminded my son and his wife that since they had ridden with me, they were going to need to figure out their own ride home. Walking out into the cool night air, I felt a sudden, exhilarating rush of absolute freedom, knowing that the real reckoning was only just beginning. My son, Justin, had called me earlier that week under the guise of wanting a nice family dinner, but the moment I walked into the dimly lit dining room, I saw his mother-in-law, Nora, sitting in the booth like a reigning queen of bitterness. Nora was a woman who used sarcasm like a blunt instrument, taking endless pleasure in tearing other people down to make her own fragile ego feel larger. Within 10 minutes, she had made fun of my jacket, sneered at my husband's small pension, and complained that my quiet life in a suburban home was a pathetic waste of time. Justin sat there completely spineless, intensely staring at his ice water while his wife, Chloe, offered validating little smirks whenever her mother landed a verbal strike. I kept my composure, focusing on my meal and attempting to pivot toward neutral topics. But Nora was determined to turn me into her evening's public entertainment. Nora leaned across the table, swirling her expensive glass of wine with a nasty little grin, asking how it felt to live in a giant, empty house with no husband to care for and no actual purpose in life while everyone else worked real jobs. I set my napkin down, looked directly at her, and calmly explained that my peace and quiet were privileges I had earned through hard work and sacrifice over a lifetime. Chloe instantly rolled her eyes, scoffing that I was far too sensitive, and that her mother was simply making innocent jokes that I was taking way too seriously. When I replied that insults were not jokes but merely bad manners, Chloe leaned forward with pure contempt and told me that if I did not like the commentary, I could pay the bill and get out. She thought she was putting me in my place, but she actually gave me the exact permission I needed to cut the anchor tethering me to their disrespect. The next morning at 8, I was sitting on my back porch sipping hot coffee when my phone began buzzing incessantly with Justin's name flashing across the screen. I let it ring 3 full times before answering, immediately hearing my son panicking about how I had embarrassed them, forced them to pay $40 for a late-night ride, and ruined his wife's mood. I took a slow sip of coffee, greeted him warmly, and reminded him that I had simply followed Chloe's exact instructions by paying the entire bill and removing myself from a toxic dinner table. He groaned in frustration, demanding that I apologize to both women for throwing a dramatic tantrum, but I reminded him that I had never once raised my voice or lost my temper. When he warned me that Chloe would not let me visit their apartment until I begged for forgiveness, I smiled, told him that arrangement suited me perfectly, and hung up. Sitting alone in my quiet living room, I realized that if Chloe and Justin wanted to act like superior adults who did not need me around, their financial lives should reflect that sudden independence. For years, I had quietly paid for Justin's cellular line, carried Chloe on my master family data plan, and covered the auto insurance policies for both of their vehicles out of habit from when Justin was a struggling intern. It added up to hundreds of dollars every single month, a financial gift I was happy to provide when I thought we were a loving family. But funding the lifestyle of people who treated me like garbage was entirely out of the question. I logged into my account portal, clicked 4 buttons to strip their devices from my primary account, and submitted a formal request to cancel their vehicle coverage by the end of the business day. I did not send a warning text or write a dramatic message, letting the silent consequences of their own actions do the talking. By Tuesday afternoon, the full weight of reality hit their household, and Justin came speeding into my driveway because his disconnected phone could no longer make a basic call. He burst through my front door using his old spare key, holding his useless smartphone in the air like a piece of evidence, and loudly demanding to know if my credit cards had been compromised. I calmly dried my hands on a dish towel, looked my 30-year-old son in the eye, and informed him that nothing was hacked, but I had permanently removed them from all my financial accounts. He stood there blinking in sheer disbelief, shouting that I was being vindictive over a minor dinner argument, but I reminded him that generosity requires basic human respect, which had clearly been revoked. He paced around my kitchen, complaining that they did not have the spare cash to handle surprise utility bills. So I casually pointed out that he had a steady paycheck and savings to figure it out. When yelling failed to yield results, Chloe decided to take a far more aggressive approach the very next morning by showing up on my front porch with her mother standing right behind her. I unlocked the heavy wooden front door but kept the sturdy metal security screen firmly locked between us. Watching as Nora smirked and Chloe demanded that I open up immediately so they could set me straight. Nora scoffed through the screen, accusing me of acting like a bitter child, but I politely reminded her that it was my home and I had absolute authority over who was permitted inside my private space. Chloe shouted that I was destroying the entire family over a victimless joke. But I looked her dead in the eye and told her that I was simply establishing healthy boundaries against bullies. Before they could launch into another synchronized tirade, I stepped back into the hallway, shut the heavy inner door, turned the deadbolt, and left them standing on the porch complaining to the empty air. Over the following week of complete silence, I walked through my spacious 4-bedroom home and realized it was far too large for a single woman who wanted a peaceful, low-maintenance lifestyle. I also remembered how Chloe and Justin used to whisper during holidays about how they would eventually move in and renovate the space for themselves, viewing my property as their guaranteed future asset. Knowing they saw my hard-earned home as their personal financial cushion made my decision easy. So I picked up the phone and hired a top real estate agent to list the property immediately. Within 2 days, the agent had taken high-end photographs, and I signed the contract to put the house on the market, without giving my son or his wife a single second of advance notice. I spent the entire weekend packing up cardboard boxes, stacking Justin's old high school trophies and comic books in the garage, feeling lighter and more empowered with every single roll of packing tape I used. A massive bright red sale sign was posted on my front lawn by Tuesday, and by Wednesday afternoon, Justin came flying into the house pale-faced and trembling with anger. He pointed a shaking finger toward the front yard, stammering that I could not sell the family home because he and Chloe were planning to move in next year to help me manage the property. I politely informed him that I did not need any assistance managing my life and was purchasing a modern luxury condo downtown, prompting him to call Chloe on speakerphone in a state of absolute panic. Chloe began screaming through the phone speaker, accusing me of throwing away Justin's rightful inheritance out of pure spite, but I held the phone close and told her that I was very much alive and using my own equity to fund my retirement. I handed the phone back to Justin, pointed toward the garage where his old belongings were packed, and asked him to clear his things out before the buyers arrived. The property sold in just 4 days, and a month later, I stood in the empty driveway watching the professional moving truck haul my furniture away to my beautiful new home. Justin's truck pulled up to the curb one last time, with Chloe sitting in the passenger seat glaring at me with immense resentment as she realized their free ride was officially over forever. She muttered that I was going to end up completely miserable and lonely in a small condo all by myself. But I held my head high and told her I would rather be alone in my own space than surrounded by people who disrespect me. Justin looked deeply ashamed, stepping forward to ask if I needed any help, but I simply handed him a sealed envelope containing my new address and strict rules that he was only allowed to visit if he called first. I looked directly at Chloe, made it crystal clear that her mother was permanently banned from stepping foot on my property, and watched as Justin finally told his wife to shut her mouth. My new condo was an absolute paradise, featuring massive floor-to-ceiling windows, a state-of-the-art kitchen, and a quiet private patio where I planted fresh herbs and tomatoes in terracotta pots. It had only 2 bedrooms, one for myself and one designed as a tranquil reading room, ensuring there was no space for ungrateful guests to crash or overstay their welcome. A few months later, Justin came to visit me on a sunny Sunday afternoon completely alone, bringing a box of my favorite pastries and sitting quietly with me on the back patio. He admitted that without my financial safety net, he and Chloe were arguing constantly about money and lifestyle expectations. But I simply listened gently without offering to pay a single bill or gloating over his struggles. When he stood up to leave, he hugged me tightly, whispered a sincere apology for how he had treated me, and acknowledged that I had done the right thing by standing my ground. Standing on my patio after he left, I realized that true peace does not come from swallowing your pride or keeping the quiet just to avoid conflict with toxic people. It comes from knowing your absolute worth, setting firm boundaries, and having the courage to remove your energy and financial support from those who take you for granted. You never need to scream, argue, or explain yourself to people who are dedicated to misunderstanding your kindness as weakness. Sometimes the most powerful move is simply walking away and building a better life on your own terms. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story today. And if you have ever had to draw a hard line to protect your own personal peace, please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below.